Every week, JavaScript developers receive another breaking news. React is dead. Vue is dead. Svelte is useless. Or some of them will say Vue killed React or Svelte killed Vue. Oh my show. There was one time they said HTMX has killed JavaScript. You know HTMX, right? Go Google it in case you don't know. Then 3 days later, they will say JavaScript has returned from the dead with what? Signals. But my guy, how many funerals this language won't do? JavaScript does suffer. But some of them, they learn front end like person with they pursue down full for Lagos. Immediately one framework begin to they move, you go jump, enter. Before you sit down, another framework don't show, you don't still jump, enter. Kilo day. After 5 years like this, you go see say you don't know the installation command for about 25 different frameworks. That's not versatility. Oh. That one, what do they do? Technical tourism. That's what you're doing. Today, let's talk about why understanding the system under your tool can carry you or will carry you further than chasing every new framework that enters Twitter with motivational speech. Anyways, now me Amos Pikins, the tech prophet. Oh yeah, they with me. Come closer first. Frameworks are useful. Let's settle that. React is useful. Vue, Svelte, Solid, all of them. All the gbogbo they are useful. Whatever framework when they release between now while they record this video and when you they see them, they are all very useful. So the problem is not learning frameworks. The problem is building your entire professional identity on top of framework. You see them? Or on top of framework syntax. Because syntax is the first thing where AI fit generate. The understanding, now the part where you still need to bring to the table. If you ask AI, build a responsive dashboard with authentication, dark mode, animation, and emotional support. And of course, AI go definitely produce something. But by the time the page can begin to the freeze, requests start to duplicate. And then maybe user can complain, say as they click the button once, it submits the four times. What do you want to do? You and AI go look on yourself like saying a police and suspect, they look each other. Now that time, fundamental enter the conversation. My previous video yesterday, you see I talk more about these things. Front-end developers are under constant pressure to learn everything. One influencer will just come out now and say, if you are not using server components, you are already behind. What bullshit is that? Another one will constantly come and say, server components are a mistake. Which one you go follow? Like, you know those videos where go to say, you are sleeping 6 hours, you can never make it. Your mate are sleeping 3 hours. You can't still see a proco doctor go there say, if you no sleep 6 to 7 to 8 hours, you they die small. Which one you go do? I just they play. Another person will still launch one course, say, learn the framework replacing React before React discovers it. Okay, no wala. Now you the one replace, so and then you can go buy the course. Before you learn the course, reach module 3, the creator go say, I no longer recommend this framework. No be wahala be that. Then you can say refund unko. You see, this constant movement creates the illusion that progress means collecting more tools. So your resume go come they be like saying a supermarket inventory. You go see React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, all it dey inside your resume. We go even see like 4 to 5 libraries where nobody don't hear before. Like Quick, Astro, Remix. We go see am there. But when interviewer can ask you what happens after a user enters URL inside the browser, everywhere go very blur, everywhere go become quiet. You can start with basically you see okay. If you look, please see once a developer explains and starts with basically 6 times without explaining anything, just know say that guy village people don't enter that technical interview. Just know framework knowledge actually get expiry date. Framework knowledge good though, but much of it should be, and it is, temporary. Because APIs change. Recommended pattern self, they change. Routine, they change. Yes, I tell you. Now remember that my new life framework I dey work on, I don't still change most of the things between now and that, between that time and now. State management changes. Folder structure changes. Just yesterday, everybody said put everything inside one component. Today, they tell you separate concerns, okay? Tomorrow, they'll tell you, say, collocate everything. Which one we go do? Everything is changing. Next tomorrow, they'll say, collocate the things you separate, but separate the things you collocate. Maybe while I be that. See, you don't know the say JavaScript ecosystem. If make simple ideas become like say the we are bada. If you even make small things become conference talk, the core system becomes more stable or remains more stable. The browser should be still has to request resources. The server go still send response. JavaScript go still run according to execution rules. The DOM must definitely still have to be updated. The browser go still calculate layout. It go still paint pixels. It go still display results. You dey see am. Network go still get latency. Very large files go still take time to download. Memory self still has limit. User go still click that button twice if nothing happens. Or let me say if nothing happens immediately. And this one are the most important one. Users still do not care about the framework you used. Period. Nobody don't ever open bank app before and say, the transfer failed though, but at least they use Next.js. Have you ever heard of that before? No. The user just wants the thing to work. They think. Make I tell you the physics of code. Every application, they obey certain realities, right? You don't go feel motivate latency away. No. Abi you go feel add inspirational code to memory leak. You know fit. You don't go feel fix 12 megabyte JavaScript bundle with your positive thinking. No. The system does not care whether the animation looked beautiful. Whether on your MacBook Pro with 32 gigabytes of RAM. You don't care. Your user is opening the application with one very tired Android phone. We get 4% battery. You never see something. A network where they quarrel with your destiny. They play. Nadia. That is where engineering begins. Understanding the physics of code means understanding what your code is actually asking the machine to do. When your page load, what files are downloaded? For example, how large are they? Now, which request the block rendering? Which work they happen on the main thread? Wetin dey cause unnecessary re-renders? Which data you dey fetch repeatedly? Wetin you dey store inside memory? Wetin go happen if the network becomes slow? Or wetin go happen when server can't return error give you? Because if your answer to every performance problem na move install another package, you know the debug o, na more suspects you dey invite to the crime scene so. Then learn what browser is doing. A very good front-end engineer should understand how the browser works and how it handles these things. No be just how to make components, for example. You need to understand HTML. And when I say HTML, I mean real HTML. Some of nothing say I know HTML. Okay. No be say you go get 27 divs where they wear different class names. So understand semantic elements. Understand forms properly. Understand how keyboard navigation works. You need to understand accessibility. You need to understand CSS layout. You need to understand flexbox, grid, positioning, even stacking context. Some of them never hear this thing before. Specificity. Man, don't go bite my tongue. Because the only thing way they go say, devs go say, they want to know responsive design. Who told you that that's all there is? Even the responsive design, you don't know where. Some people don't install plenty package or UI frameworks. I bet you I say UI library just because they want to avoid how to understand, say Z index 99999. They work or it no they work. So you need to understand JavaScript itself, how they take run, how they execute, on what engine is it running on. In fact, which problem JavaScript they solve, how it take come, why. At the time my students say, if you understand why something was created, the remaining thing are small thing. Because it will help you to start to think in that context. Like at the time I tell my React students, say, in your mind, just know, say React go always re-render anything. Except you put the rules. So when they do something, in their mind, they'll just look, say, this is free render. Let me use memo, for example. Let me use ref, depending on what you are doing. Let me use callback, for example. You understand? So you're going to say, no, be just to write down. If you get fault, if you get down for your mind. So understand closures, understand scopes, understand promises. I teach my backend, my students when they learn backend with JavaScript, that's not JS. I teach them rich classes before even they talk about, say, me they start to they do endpoint. You get why? Understand event loop, understand references, or things many, understand mutation, or understand modules. One important one is understand garbage collection, understand how objects are stored and moved around. Very important. You don't need to become assembly language priest. No. But you should understand enough about memory and even execution so that you know why your application is behaving the way it is behaving. You need to also understand rendering pipelines like the DOM, CSS object model, layout, paint, composition, reflow, repaint. Some of them never hear these things, so I don't mention. I never hear them before. For Nigeria, for Africa, una must know tech by fire, by force. These things feel no they be waiting they rain every week. But now them go determine whether your interface go flow smoothly or it go they move like PowerPoint presentation. You know all those kind of presentation what they do on project or we get fault, that kind of type. So learn networking. Many front-end developers they treat network like say na abadabidi. Even me recently, now because of my DevOps class, I say about bad networking, they very important. Die. I they teach the networking for the DevOps class like this or more based on because now my manager they always make curriculum. So me, I go check if I don't know some things there. I go just the networking. Me and networking will not too. But in the course of preparing for that topic in the DevOps class, or more, networking is important in everything. Just rest. Everything we do in tech. Anyways, let's move on. So learn networking because you now you go call that your fetch API. Data go appear. You go say praise the Lord. But what it really happen? What it be HTTP? You know? What it be the difference between get, post, put, patch? Even the new one we they bring out, I think it's option. I watch it on normal codes video. I think it's options. I think you don't know what to be headers. You don't know what to be cookies. You don't know how authentication take they work. What to be cores. You don't know CORS. You don't know why browser they block your request. You go begin to think. Or do you know why some data should be cached? What go happen when a request times out? What's the difference between pulling, WebSocket, and server sent events? Some of them never hear this thing before. Assure me, why should you not send 5 megabyte JSON because backend gave it to you? No. A senior front-end engineer, no, you just merely they consume APIs. No. Them they understand the cost. Now, why front-end engineer go build something? The same thing, another one go build and one go they accumulate server cost, another one go just they mild. Engineering are the difference. Because they understand the cost, they understand the failure, they understand the behavior, they know the failure modes of communicating with them. When backend developers will they say every day says it works on my system or my machine, you suppose get enough knowledge to prove that their machine has become an unreliable witness. Again, learn performance. Your application will look very fine, but it's still badly engineered. You click one drop down and the entire page re-renders. I've seen it in production apps. There are some apps you go see, I don't want call name. I show one to some of my class people. I'm building something, and my ChatGPT recommended another one that looks like that. I should check. When I check and I try to create an account, I was disappointed. Like they use AI. AI is not the problem. They have no idea. You know those kind of things where we say some UI go fair flash before another one can show. We listen, we don't judge. You type one character and 17 APIs leaves the browser like say an emergency exit. You display 10 items, but you downloaded over 10,000 because we may need them later. You they play later for we year. Performance, as now they do mistake, you think performance is about speed, but you say the project performance is fast. Who told you? It affects conversion, battery life, mobile data, user trust, search rankings. To say something, the performance, no just me say it fast. No. A slow application, no be only say maybe not just a technical inconvenience. Now product failure with the weird nice CSS. You know, pass like that. Then learn security. Framework, yes, can make development easier. They cannot outsource your judgment, no. You still need to understand cross-siting scripting, for example. I say now cross-site scripting. Cross-site request forgery. Some of them don't know them. Token storage, input validation. I know say some of them know they write all these things. What? If I call you as well now, you go verse. Anyways, what does low-level knowledge actually gives you? It can actually make you a stronger engineer. If you learn how memory take the work, if it help you understand the references, for example, it will help you understand copying, garbage collection, even leaks, just how memory works. So if you learn how operating system they work, it will help you understand processes, even resource limits. If you learn how network protocols they work, it will help you design communication systems well. If you learn data structure or architecture well, it will help you to fit design better systems. There are many, I don't think they link them. The video done the long they go. So stop being a library tourist. What do you mean? You dey visit every technology. You know they know and finish you, they visit all. You know how to start all of them, but you know if you don't even understand how something they work for browser. So might give you better learning strategy. First, choose one primary framework and then become productive with it. No be say we dey say make you marry am. No. Just up to the date the entire ecosystem. Most of na be framework ashawo. Stop it. Then spend serious time on transferable fundamentals. For example, my read and come out. HTML and accessibility, CSS and browser layout, JavaScript and TypeScript, HTTP and browser networking. You know the right, I know. Baba, carry biro, right. HTTP and browser networking, state and data flow, security, testing, performance, architecture, debugging, learn Git, deployment. Is that happy they arrange them, abi? Then if you can learn other frameworks when real reason come out, say okay, you need to learn them. It's understandable. Maybe a job requires it, or maybe a project benefits from it, or maybe you won't just compare architectural approaches. But say everybody is talking about is not a learning thing you should carry. Then they talk about and don't mean say you need to learn them. No. So frameworks are vehicles. Frameworks are also driving skills. If you know how to drive, you could definitely feel adjust to another car. Abi? But if all the thing where you dey memorize now, where all the button dey inside one specific car, Baba, how you want to drive another motor? Anyways, I don't try. Ma don't dey pay me anything, Romy. Bye.